So many spiritual traditions, if not most wisdom traditions, if not all, are at the heart is this endeavor or aspiration to understand our human experience. This empowerment, which comes through understanding, also just taking an interest and caring, seems to bring this whole new dimension of becoming conscious, becoming aware, uh, becoming more let's say, wise and understanding and caring, loving and compassionate to the human experience, who and what we are, our mind and our heart, why we feel the way we do, why we think the thoughts we do, why we act the way we do, what the intentions, what the desires, what the motivations behind those actions are. What are those actions actually intending to fulfill? These are very, very basic, as it were, or initial inquiries that the wisdom traditions are focusing on or emphasizing, so that we can, if we do already have some instinctual understanding or a very explicit understanding that much of what is fundamental to our human experience and this quality of life and fulfillment is our aspirations for happiness, for this instinct we have to seek happiness, to seek, well, pleasure, to seek happiness, to seek harmony, to seek peace, to seek adventure, even, and however we understand the culmination of this, a freedom, a liberation, some kind of enlightenment like that. It's a whole range. And likewise, the complementary instinct or an endeavor of the human heart, the human experience, our life, and what our heart and mind are most often engaged in likewise, this to be free, free from pain, free from the unpleasant, free from disharmony, conflict, disease, danger, insecurity, suffering, in any and every way. We see if we look at our actions, the actions of our fellow beings in the world, we see that there is this expression that we see in both very minor and major ways, or what may seem to be indirect or very direct to bring this about. So the wisdom traditions are in agreement that this deeper understanding of who and what we are, why our heart and mind feel and think the way they do, and why we tend to act the way we do, and whether those actions have genuine consequences that are genuinely fulfilling. So this is the Buddha Dharma is definitely a wisdom tradition among the wisdom traditions that has this aspiration at the heart of it. This sort of liberation through understanding and acting in alignment with that understanding, which brings about the genuine happiness and alleviates the genuine suffering. Or, as we like to say, when the wisdom dimension is explicitly included with the heart dimension, that may all beings have happiness and liberation and the causes of happiness and liberation. or may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. We see that the very sort of intelligence or way to bring that about, to fulfill those heartful aspirations, is the wisdom element, or even just our basic day-to-day intelligence that nature is providing for us to be able to survive and thrive and fulfill itself. So the wisdom traditions, what Buddha means one who is awake, awakening, or this wakefulness, basically is shining this light of wisdom and awareness on our experience to develop deeper insight into it. Whether we're calling that mindfulness or wise attention or knowing, consciousness, awareness, conscientiousness, our conscience, all of these are pointing us to become more aware and interested, to understand our experience. And yes, perhaps I would like to share.
All beings want to have happiness and avoid suffering. And why is there so much suffering in the world? And why is there so much suffering in our own lives? And that's because we don't quite understand how this whole mind-body works, how this whole structure works, how nature works. And by learning to meditate and learning to look deeply into this whole mind-body structure with this mindfulness, we begin to slowly understand or unravel that knot, and we begin to understand how that all works and operates, and how you also see how you can come out of that. And the goal of Buddhist meditation, therefore, is not to get all kinds of wonderful meditative attainments and etc. That those are just tools for a higher goal. And a higher goal is to get rid of all these defilements that obstruct us from seeing how this whole thing works and obstruct our own happiness and that of others. So what we first need to do is to calm the mind, relax the body. Because quite often, when our body is not relaxed, our mind will not be relaxed. Because it's constantly busy with like, oh, there's this pain in my knee, or move, or so when the body gets relaxed first, and then the mind can get relaxed. And when we allow the mind to settle, to become more peaceful by itself, it's not like we're telling the mind, okay, now observe your breath and keep observing your breath. And at the time your mind doesn't want to do that, so bring it back and bring it back and bring it back. But that doesn't actually work. It never worked for me. Because the mind doesn't want to stay there because it's not happy at that point. So there is something else that is more important, is how you do this, how you're not what you're observing, but with what mindset, I can say it that way, but how you're observing it. Are you observing your breath or whatever object you're observing in your meditation with calmness, with love and kindness, or are you observing it with an attitude of like, come on, mind, you have to do this? Because that doesn't work. And so that's basically what we're learning, is to step back and just be in peace, and to just observe whatever is happening with this awareness in the present moment. And when we get the hang of that, it becomes such a beautiful tool for everything we do in life. And we learn to see how this whole mind structure works. And what we do ourselves to sabotage our own happiness. And you can see also on like a world scale how much this not knowing, this not having wisdom of how this whole thing works can create so much suffering for the people around us as well. So it's first important to look inside ourselves and see like, oh, where is negativity live in me? Where does greed live in me? Where does selfishness live in me? Where do all these things live in me? Because we all have that. We have to learn to understand it. We've all learned in some way to be. We're all conditioned phenomena. So we've learned these as habitual responses to the things that we encounter in life. But that might have worked like when things happened maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were born, whenever, but it doesn't work now. So if we learn to see that, oh, I've got this response coming up of negativity because somebody did something, somebody said something, somebody posted something on the internet or anything, where does that live? And going inside and looking at that and using that um, as a gift, as something that, hey, our buttons got triggered. Where do they live? How does this work? And then when we stay with that, with love and kindness, with mindfulness, just like a scientist observing what is really happening here, then at some point we will get it. We'll go, this is how it works. And now I don't need it anymore. And you can let it go. And it might still come up back another time because there might be more to that. But you'll notice that every time it will be a little bit less. And after a while, you go, oh, where did that go? I used to have like this negativity or this depression or this anger or whatever, and now it's gone. It doesn't come up anymore. So that's basically what we're doing here. And what this is about is to find these obstructions to our own happiness. And when we can do that, we will also notice that the people around us will feel that, will notice that. And they will feel happy around us. And at some point, they will start to question, like, what are you really doing? You used to be this terrible, angry person, and now you're so loving. But you're all loving person, people, don't worry. But they'll see a change in you. And when they do, they might question like, well, what did you do? And then you can explain to them, oh, this is what I did. And they might be inspired to also try that. And this is how we can spread this love to other people. And so they can also learn. But we first have to start with ourselves.
So yes, in ordinary life, if we in that sort of unreflected, unexamined life that we might live, then we might live as if we know what it is to be human. We might live as if we know what it means to be alive. And yet, if we start to look more closely at what is this thing, this body, this mind, this body mind, it's so strange. It's this is a material object, and this is my hand is a material object. But just by thinking about it, I can move this up and down. But I can't move this external object. Or if I close my eyes, there's darkness, and then if I open them, then the world, whatever is there, it just appears. I don't. It's not me that creates what I encounter. Whatever is there appears. Or if we are just sitting, talking, or listening to someone, and then there's some sound in the background, something in us automatically recognizes, oh, that's a bird, oh, that's some sound, someone opening the door. I don't need to consciously make an effort to see, to decide. Something knows how, recognizes what these things are. So it's like, what is that sense of knowing that's always there in the background? It's because it's so close and so ordinary, seemingly ordinary. We don't maybe tend to notice. But what if we are able to sort of shift our attention, the sort of energy we give to more and more energy into that knowing. Ordinarily, the mind can easily get caught up in things that need to be done. So if we are walking somewhere, then maybe our mind is already at the destination, and then we are thinking, oh, what will we do then, etc. But and then we forget as what is happening here and now. And then, like the reading this morning by Ajahn Chah, we always have time to breathe. The body is always breathing. I don't need to tell it, okay, do this, do that. As that if we trust in that awareness, trust in that knowing, and then what does one's subjective experience become? How is it that we would experience whatever we may be experiencing, whether on a sort of subjective level, whether it's unpleasant or pleasant or neutral. What is the relationship we have to those states? Then that leads to the examination of what is this thing that we call suffering, the difficulties we may encounter in life, both internal, external, and then so that it's like it gives a different framework, different perspective. One can approach these experiences from, and like in the first noble truth. Buddha's encouragement. It's not so much to try and escape or destroy or annihilate suffering. It's more to understand what is this that we experience. And the more clearly we can understand in present experience through cultivating that presence, awareness, etc., as Ajahn and Venerable have been encouraging, then we can understand more deeply as these mind states arise, where they are coming from, and then what are the causes that bring them about, or what are the causes that give them so much power over us. So, and then hopefully that leads to such a letting go, a process of letting go, to allow that process to happen. So it's not so much that we, as a sort of conscious choice, let go, but more like allowing that to happen. Like they have one of the images they use is for practice is if you have a sapling, a small tree or plant, and then you want to make it grow. So we can't make it go by pulling at it. But what we can do is make sure it has enough soil, water, protection, etc. That it needs. So putting our effort into cultivating the appropriate supportive conditions. And then it's not that I make the tree grow. It's in its nature to grow if it has what it needs. And I feel it's similar with, say, for example, wisdom in the heart. It's not so much that we as individuals become wise, but more allowing that sort of inherent wisdom, that seeing as one observes, as one trusts in the awareness, then one sees these patterns that tend to repeat themselves, these habitual patterns our mind tends to get caught up in. And the more clearly we see them, the more clearly we recognize them, then there's that potential to free ourselves from them. This comes through that.
Yeah. This is what they what they say. They actually tell us that the wisdom does its own work. The wisdom will actually translate into action. When insights or wisdom arise, there's naturally a kind of a letting go or a release of some fixed idea or kind of habit loop we have about something, or the resistance to letting it go. So as Ajahn mentioned, this, and perhaps we're all familiar, this noble truth of suffering. Well, the Buddha, one virtue certainly of the Buddha's teaching is this very methodical presentation, this very comprehensive and methodical presentation we call the Noble Eightfold Path. And the forerunner of the path, or at the forefront there, is the right view, where the Buddha does hold up this noble truth of the Four Noble Truths, this noble truth of suffering, which actually very much includes this noble truth of freedom, or the noble truth of genuine happiness, it's said. So it's really an emphasizing of that as this overall project that we're engaged in, and the comprehensive inclusion of everything in our life, to see that it's coming into a wise alignment with that, to actually see what are the causes and conditions, or skillful is a big word that they use. What is the skillful understanding and action that's going to bring about this alleviation of suffering, or this optimization of happiness, or this ultimate liberation or freedom. So that will be the nature of an insight. In fact, in the traditions, they don't call it wisdom if it doesn't translate into action. It has to be sort of that transformative. It has to enter our heart and it will translate into action. But think about it, it's an oversimplification, it's easier said than done. But often if we get an insight that some idea we have, or some habit we have, or some reaction we have is perpetuating our suffering, or is preventing our happiness, obscuring our happiness, that instinct that we have inside will want to let it go, will want to change, because that's what's sort of preventing its fulfillment. This fulfillment to have happiness and freedom, or to be free from suffering. So every little insight that we're gaining through this, turning the light of our mindfulness, our awareness onto our heart and mind and our experience, in order to understand, in order to be empowered to participate more, not from outdated conditioning that we have, or pre-programmed reactions, but actually bringing that mindfulness and awareness to understand something and say, hey, is this serving? And how can I use my better judgment, or my insight, or just the raw power of my caring my love and compassion, my love to have happiness and well-being, my compassion, this inherent compassion in our heart, to be free from suffering, to want to be free from conflict, to want to be in harmony. How can I utilize that more effectively? Actually bring that about. So this Noble Eightfold Path is very methodically and comprehensively bringing that kind of mindfulness and wisdom to every aspect of our life. Often it will start with behavior, these basic precepts that we're keeping that are about not harming ourselves and others. We can see that these 5 basic precepts, for example, if we were to look out into the world and see how much of the human suffering is coming from just violation of these basic precepts of harmonious living, harmonious conduct, skillful conduct that's considerate of the well-being of others. It's a lot. It's a lot. Could be as high as 90%. Maybe not the whole story, but a lot of avoidable suffering, conflict can be avoided just by keeping a basic, ethical, virtuous conduct like this. So that's already a sign of wisdom and intelligence, how to avoid conflict, and especially in oneself as well. Avoiding remorse about one's conduct. That's a real sort of cancer on our sense of self-esteem. Maybe cancer isn't the right word, but it definitely, when we feel good about our conduct and we're free from remorse about it, or we do aspire to course correct on conduct when we see it's been unskillful, that's a big boost to our self-respect, our self-confidence, our self-esteem. So that's such a huge gateway into this integrated project of understanding in ways which can transform our action as well. So that's a huge component of the Eightfold Path. And then there's the meditation and the wisdom and the unification of 3. Right? So hopefully we're all seeing how immediately relevant this is. I mean, presumably we're being well acquainted with the Buddha's teachings. And it's not just a project of like meditation or learning how to, train the mind in non-distraction, but that is said to be a very important first step to just having more awareness about one's situation and being able to not react. See, a lot of the reactions, they come up unchecked when our mindfulness slips. So this thing about being present aware, being present and aware, being mindful does give us the space to intervene with better judgment, better insight, or a good reflection, which arouses our compassion and caring to act skillfully like that.
If you start doing more virtuous actions, not just keeping precepts or something like that, but putting these things into action and just doing kind things for other people or for yourself, then you'll notice that these little things that you do are actually making you happier already. Just giving the money to a homeless person, for instance, or making a cup of coffee for a colleague. Normally we just do these things and go, yeah, that everybody would do that, and we don't think about it anymore. But stop for a minute and just see how that feels, and stay with those feelings. And it's like, oh, that actually feels really good. Like even all the chores that you do here, some of you are cooking or cleaning up or yeah, all the chores that you do here, looking after the monastics, just stop for a minute and see, like, hey, you're actually doing something really good for the whole group, for everyone. Everybody's going to really appreciate it if the toilets are clean, if the food's on especially food quite often is on the table. So if you've helped with any of these chores, whatever it is, doing the gong, anything, um, it's making people happy and they really appreciate it. So you can look inside yourself and see, like, how does that feel? And you can bring that in your meditation. And the first thing you do in meditation is first relax the body and see, oh, what did I do today? Oh, I've actually done something really nice, something good. And how does that feel? Make more of that feeling. Don't just step over it as like, oh yeah, everybody would do that, and oh yeah, it's something I have to do or whatever. You will look into that, what you've actually done for other people. That is something that can really propel your meditation forward as well. And it makes you happier in daily life. This is like many of you know probably that Adam Brown's one of my teachers, and this is one thing that that struck me, that he said, "Oh, this is what he does when he, because he's known for a very deep meditation as well, and so that this is one of the things that he does to start his meditation. It's just to see, it's like, oh, what service did I give to others today? What did I do? And to really feel what that felt like, and then the happiness comes up, the joy comes up, and that joy is so important for our mindfulness and for our yeah, for everything, because that joy is really making sure that the mind really wants to be with these feelings. The mind doesn't want to be constantly with pain. It just doesn't like that. You have to put effort in to constantly make it watch pain or something like that. But when something is joyful and it sees the purpose of it, it's like, oh, this is where I want to be. And the meditation and whether you are sitting meditation or you're doing walking meditation or even doing chores. Doing chores is a form of meditation as well if you do it mindfully. All these things become much more joyful and happy, and that brings over to your entire life, everything you do. But it's a practice. You have to keep on going at it and keep on bringing the mind back and seeing, like, see, look, this is joyful. This is making me happy. Makes me happy to do something for other people. So continue doing that.
So often one of the paradigms that is used to describe a spiritual practice is dana, sila, bhavana. So dana, generosity, sila, so the ethics or morality, and then bhavana is cultivation, including formal meditation or listening to talks, reflection, contemplation, etc. Because often what can happen is we can think of, okay, spiritual practice, that's when we are doing formal meditation, and the rest of our life is just, whatever it is. But I like this dana, sila, bhavana because it's encouraging us to sort of widen our view of what we think of as spiritual practice. And as Venerable Vimala was reflecting, so dana, it's not so much about giving material things, but more an attitude of how we approach a particular person, a particular situation, So we can approach it from a point of view of what can I get from this person or this situation. Or one can approach it as what can I give to this person or situation. And then obviously one needs to use wisdom in terms of if one is in some sort of exploitative situation, then maybe what can I give might not be the best approach. But in general, all the terms, and then as Venerable was describing that joyfulness, that if there is an occasion where one can give something, one can help in some way, then that joyfulness that arises, at least I find it's a much more sustainable joyfulness that comes that compared to something, okay, we want something and then we get it, and that there is a of course joyfulness to that as well. But then that tends to go away very quickly, and then we want the next thing or the next thing. And one of the things I found is if one can approach with an attitude of what can I give, then the sort of whole layer of anxiety drops away. That anxiety of, if it's what can I get, then there might be a sort of in the back of one's mind some thought, oh, will I succeed in getting what I want? Will I be able to say the right thing so that the other person will give me what I want? Or will they see through me? Or will etc. But if it's what can I give? That sort of openness to a particular situation. And again, it doesn't need to be anything big, but just say noticing if someone is going through a difficult time or suffering in some way, then saying something kind to them, or noticing if someone needs help in some way, help and then helping out. Just small things like that. And also, as Dan was saying, I think about one's own goodness and putting that on the shrine as well, and reflecting on one's own goodness, the sila, Nusati. So, because if we tend to do actions that help others, often we can dismiss them as unimportant or ordinary. But if we consciously bring them to mind and give them importance, and that can act as encouragement for spiritual practice, and also encouraging us to do more such actions. So then sila, or ethics or morality, but not morality in a sense of a sort of moralism of, oh, I must be good, I must be pure, or I must, oh, don't do these things, therefore I'm better than these other people who do them, or something like that. But rather choosing not to do action to body, speech, and mind, which causes harm to oneself or others. And that too is a sort of a gift, because it's a gift of a trustworthy being, a gift of fearlessness. So then the beings we encounter, human, non-human, and they can pick up that this person will not harm me, or will not speak to me in harmful ways, exploit me, steal from me, kill me, etc. Then they too can feel safe, and then that can also act as a protection for ourselves, because often human beings, when acting out of fear, that is when they can cause the most harm. So if that fear that they may be experienced can be sort of mitigated, then maybe they have less inclination to act in harmful ways. and also that the lack of remorse. So also related to the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path can be described as Sila, Samadhi, Panya, ethics, Samadhi, peacefulness of mind, and then Panya, wisdom. So Sila, it's whatever we may have done, maybe if no one else knows about it, we ourselves know. Then if we come to meditate and sit quietly, then those sort of memories might come up. Oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? And those sorts of, can have a tendency to agitate the mind, preventing it from becoming more peaceful. Like the image, the use of the pool of water. If it's muddy, then we can't see what's there at the bottom. But if you allow the sediment to settle, then we can see more clearly what is there. And similarly with the mind, if we allow it to become more peaceful, then we can see more clearly what is there. And that leads to the development of wisdom. So sila and then bhavana, I don't even say too much about that. We'll be doing that throughout the retreat. But that sort of aspect of formal meditation, which is also necessary and an important component of spiritual practice, that sort of more radically challenges our ordinary ways of relating to the world, to experience, that formal meditation, practice, contemplation, listening to talks, etc. So I like this because it sort of widens what we may think of as spiritual practice, and more bringing it into bringing these qualities into one's ordinary life.
There's many excellent themes here. This one of including everything in our life or in our daily life as our practice is a huge theme, actually. And it's a unification theme, or it has this unification of intent, where we are seeing that actually every moment our life it's only happening now. These things we call intentions and desires and actions, well, action is always now. Even if it's a mental action, we have this threefold scheme. We say like actions by body, speech, and mind. Well, action's always happening now. So this more like all embracing or comprehensive eightfold path mindfulness approach is really about learning how to include everything as our practice, seeing more and more how many opportunities there are to have our body, speech, and mind be more skillful or in harmony with the situation, or to just be mindful when it's not, and to be more observant of what the consequences are when we are acting unskillfully, either aware or unaware. I mean, there just may be very innocent things that we have not learned yet, and we need to learn. There's the saying, a mistake is only a mistake when it's repeated. But life is one mistake after another. You see, this is very much the wisdom approach of life as a learning opportunity. Even these sufferings, this is actually the shining light of the first noble truth. Not that dukkha or suffering is to be escaped, is to be avoided, is to be suppressed, ignored, denied. No, it's to be understood. A hallmark feature of a wisdom tradition is to understand suffering. So in our tradition, or the practice traditions, the wisdom traditions, they really turn the tables on that habit, or as innocent as it may be. They do say this, they call it it's tempting to start to geek out on the Pali because we hear the others doing it, but we're not sure everyone is that, Theravadan just yet. But it is something. But they do call it an underlying tendency that, as if nature put it here herself or itself, that when there's an unpleasant feeling, there's aversion to it. When there's a pleasant, let's say, sensation, there's attraction to it. But just think about, even if we use a little evolutionary theory here, just think about that amoeba with that cell wall. They say that's where the first sense of self comes from. Now we're separate from our environment, and we need to calculate using specific, stimuli or information inputs. One will be pleasant, one will be unpleasant. The pleasant one has the promise of survive and thrive. The unpleasant one has the sense of threat, sense of danger, like that. Something so natural. We can see how our feeling or our heart, or for the Pali geeks, chitta, actually has inherent in it this very universal aspect of life, or our life, or being, or sentient beings, to have this sort of aversion to the unpleasant, attraction to the pleasant, like that. So in a very nature-centric kind of approach, and combined with the wisdom approach, one will be holding the space for both of those as just natural instincts that we have, and just looking to see where we can kind of upgrade our mode of operation in regarding them to actually fulfill them more and more. So like this point about the muddy water, that's a classic one. Okay, it sounds a little denigrating to call the mind a muddy puddle of water because there could be hidden gems in there. Isn't that where you pan for gold or you find diamonds? So, but the mud, just especially in this sense where we're talking about like calming and stilling our mind, or just when the mind is kind of free from disturbance, it will sort of clarify and reveal its a pristineness of like the pure water. Often when we use this term pure, it's just like pure water, not polluted or transparent or crystal clear, as we say. So we can think of the mind like that. There's a saying, the mind makes a good servant when it's in the service of our well-being, but a bad master when it's like the victim of conditioning and circumstances. So a lot of this is just about, training the mind in simple ways, or how it's kind of a both end. We have sort of a positivity approach where we're developing or cultivating, even this term bhavana has this sense of cultivation, development. So we're actually using our best judgment, or we're receiving very, brilliant pointings from the Buddha or other, spiritual traditions on what to develop, what is worthy of cultivation. And the Buddha's teachings are very explicit about this. This is our very first learning how to be reliant on our own wisdom. This is our first generating of wisdom, is learning to be more discerning about what is skillful for what is unskillful. Sometimes we'll hear the term wholesome, like when we're talking about a wholesome form of joy, like that's delighting in goodness or virtue, or these other treasures of wisdom and compassion, which we revere on our external or internal shrine, like that. So that's the very basic component of wisdom. It doesn't yet necessarily have to do with transcendent insights, which are uprooting our confusion or delusion about the nature of the way things are. This is very much solid, very, very solid and reliable wisdom that we're developing just about the most sort of ordinary things that we experience every day. Like, why does the mind behave the way it does? But that can go very deep, very quick. we'll start to see, especially in meditation, when we're beginning to sensitize and in noble silence like this, the mind does begin to quiet down. So it's not so reactive. It's more still. It is more awake and aware. And it actually has been inclined to be more curious and be taking an interest in its own behavior. See why it behaves the way it does. Sometimes we call this metacognitive awareness or just meta awareness, where we're actually we're taking our mindfulness and wisdom to understand the nature of the mind. We'll see why is it behaving the way it does. That can really, just having that first layer of narrative sort of subside can begin to reveal more deeper layers about what's happening there. And again, not in a blame sense, but in a taking interest to understand. See how there's a loving kindness and compassion inherent in that. Our wanting to be free from suffering, that's an inherent movement of love and compassion. Just there in the whole intention of the Dharma and the whole intention of why we're here. We could have some more individual reasons for being here, but this kind of universal motivation for our being here is that. So we'll begin to just see more subtle nuances to that. And then some of the more explicit insights that the Buddha is encouraging us to inquire into, like our sense of self, the self-image that we have, and to what extent that is inherited or a product of our conditioning, or how we feel others expect us to be, and how we feel obligated to accord with that, and how that might put us in conflict sometimes, or often, with how we feel in our own heart when we do take that conscientiousness, honesty, and self-confidence and begin to really put that up front. So all those kinds of insights, and then where the Buddha's pointing to different ways in which we are identifying with a certain self-image. And that is a nexus or a focus of our grasping or our identity. And we can see very clearly that this is a huge dynamic of the suffering or the reactivity or just the more dysfunctional behaviors that we see are not serving. And so it becomes very, very quickly just a real unitive practice, the understanding our heart and mind, using some of these excellent wisdom pointers or insights, and then learning how to actually be more skillful in those situations. We're just having that process of awareness, mindfulness, and reflection begin to loosen up the habitual grip, like releasing the grip, releasing some of that grasping. And so, as mentioned, this can be more of an inspiration, depending on what our inspiration is, or our character type, or how at what stage of our practice, or what our sort of more global aspirations are, how deep we'd like to go, how urgent the spiritual project is, or how we understand awakening. But yes, we'll be going deeper into this as the retreat develops.
I'm not sure what the time is.
Oh, it's 10:55.
Yeah, I was already being more in coordinator mode and thinking about the announcements I have to make. So maybe I'll just do that, and then we can continue on with the walking meditation afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall we conclude the Dhamma talk?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Well, we've had a lovely overview of some of the major emphases in the Buddha's teachings and the Noble Eightfold Path, and some of the major themes in which we are developing in meditation, and including many aspects of our daily life, and seeing how those are near and dear to our heart, and very much a reflection of how we understand ourselves and in relation to ourselves and each other and the world. And so it's said to be this is said to be of the highest endeavors. Even it's for heroes, this endeavor to develop oneself in this way and really be undertaking the challenge to learn and understand one's heart and mind, and be transforming that in more skillful and liberating ways through action and meditation. So we wish all the retreat yogis fruitful practice in the retreat.
So you probably saw the huge big box down on the table downstairs for questions. So you can write down your questions and put them in there. Some paper there as well, and pen, and then we can answer them tonight at 7 o'clock. And for those of you on Zoom, if you have any questions, you can already maybe write them in the spreadsheet, and then we'll see when we get to that whenever there is some time. So that might be like just the Icehanger spreadsheet that we normally use for the Q&A. Okay, so I think that's it. Any more announcements or?
Well, sure, Ayas, like some of the Icehanger questions, sometimes we can combine questions if they're related topics and things. So.
Oh, yes,
That's
yes.
great.
Okay, and I wish you a fruitful further practice. So at 12 o'clock we have lunch, and this afternoon there's freestyle practice. You're welcome to sit here when you want to do sitting meditation, or the walking meditation outside, or go a bit further up in the forest. It can also be quite nice sometimes to just do walking meditation on a forest path where nobody comes. And then at 4 o'clock we have a silent meditation here again. So wish you a wonderful continuation of your practice.